Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're going to be doing part 86 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to talk about the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So we've got a very interesting bunch of animals today. I'm really excited to get into some remasters and some quite cool new animals. Not too many fish this time. We've got pretty stacked group of fish and then some mammals and birds and all that. So pretty interesting episode we got going today. So we're going to be starting off with another little little fish. We've got the Oscar by Leaf and Buffzoo. Of course, the kind of dynamic duo with the fish. Really, really beautiful here. I believe this might be from like Fishing Simulator or something, but we've got the Oscar. These guys are a type of cichlid, also known as the tiger Oscar or the marble cichlid or even the velvet cichlid. These guys are typically found in tropical South America, where they naturally reside, and they often are sold for sale by food fish at local markets. But they also globally found in the aquarium trade, where they're quite a common fish people keep, and there's lots of different varieties and stuff in that we'll get into. So in terms of the description, these guys are typically about 45 centimeters long, or about 18 inches, and about 1.6 kilograms or 3.5 pounds of weight. And you can see the wild caught version or the wild type. You can see they're dark here with these yellow spotted rings, or even these yellow reddish areas where they kind of get their name, the stripe pattern, give their name the tiger cichlid. They've also been suggested to function to limit fin nipping from the piranhas and stuff like that in the natural environment, and they're actually able to alter their coloration quite rapidly, which is actually allows them to have ritualistic like territory and combat behaviors against each other and things like that, which is really cool. And juveniles typically have a different coloration from the adults and are striped with white and orange wavy bands going down their head. So in terms of their habitat, these guys are native to Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, French Guiana, Suriname, Peru, and Venezuela, and they occur in the Amazon River Basin, as lots of other river systems and things like that. And in the natural environment, they typically like to prefer slow-moving white water habitats and things like that. And feral populations have also established themselves in China, Northern Australia, and Florida as a byproduct of the aquarium fish trade, which kind of sucks. But they tend to like... they can be intolerant of colder waters, so they like waters more than 12 degrees, otherwise they'll die. And these guys are actually sexual monomorphic, with males suggested to grow more quickly, and it's sometimes occurring, some naturally occurring strange males will often possess dark patches, things like that. The species reaches sexual maturity about 1 year of age and then continues to reproduce for about 9 to 10 years old. Frequency and timing of spawning may depend on the occurrence of rain. And these type of fish are biparental substrate spawners, but there's not very much detailed information. Though in captivity, they've been known to select clean, generally flattened horizontal surfaces to lay their eggs, with smaller females laying between 300 and 500 eggs, with larger females can lay up to 2,500 to 3,000. And like most cichlids, they will practice brood care, and the duration in the wild is unknown. But yet, as in the wild, they're kind of considered a food fish and things like that by peoples, and because they eat nuts, insect larvae, shrimp, things like that, they actually are a great source of vitamin C, which is pretty cool. And they're occasionally fed in captivity different fish like crayfish, worms, things like that. They're quite territorial as well, so the size of the tank will depend on like how many you have in there, how aggressive they are, things like that. And there's lots of different varieties that you can get. There's like long-finned Oscars, where the fins are much longer than the wild type. There's also like albinos, leucistic forms, things like that. Lots of different variations and things. So really, really cool fish. Again, done by Leaf and Buffzoo. Did a wonderful job with that. So now we're moving on to some big ocean fish. We're going from the Amazon to the open ocean. We've got here the oceanic sunfish, or the mola mola. These guys are one of the two heaviest bony fish, along with its close relative, the southern sunfish. These guys, as adults, they weigh typically between 247 and 2,000 kilograms, or 545 pounds to 4,409 pounds, and the species typically lives in tropical to temperate waters across the world. And they're quite weird for a fish. You can see they're quite tall here. They look like a fish head with a really short tail and these large fins here that allow them to, which are flattened laterally or flattened up, and this actually helps them kind of swim around instead of swimming kind of like your typical fish. Quite different in that regard. That allows them to kind of be a lot more mobile in the water. So quite tall and flat with this long oval shape to them. Their body length can get up to about 3.3 meters or about 10 feet 10 inches. And the male ocean, the mature ocean sunfish has an average length of about 1.8 meters or 5 feet 11, and a fin to fin length here of about 2.5 meters or 8 feet. And they can range from 247 to 1,000 kilograms, about 545 to 2,000 pounds. But the maximum they can get up to is about 3.3 meters or even 4.2 meters across the fins and weigh up to 2,300 kilograms or 5,000 pounds in mass, which is really cool. So over the course of evolution, you can see here the caudal fin or the tail fin in the sunfish has greatly reduced and is basically just almost like a residual now, and has been replaced by a pseudo tail called the clavicus or the clavirus. The structure is found to converge from the dorsal and the anal fins, and it actually acts as a rudder. And they often swim near the surface with their dorsal fins, sometimes mistaken for those of sharks. Really, really cool. And they also have this really cool mottled pattern, as you see here. With you can see the white counter shading with the also dark splotches as well. This coloration often appears like that with reticulated collagen, and is often covered with a layer of mucus instead of scales. And they actually have the skin on the clavis is actually smoother than the body, where it can be as rough as sandpaper on the body, which is also very interesting. And often in temperate regions, these guys will drift into kelp fields that harbour cleaner wrasses that help remove parasites from their skins, stuff like that. And in tropics, they'll replace that with reef fish. So they will go and swim into coral reefs or kelp forests and find wrasse that clean them and other fish. And they've actually been known to breach as well, and they can clear the surface of the water for about 3 meters or so, or 10 feet, and in an effort to try and dislodge parasites, which is quite a common thing that affects these guys. Really, really cool fish we've got going on here. So in terms of their range of behavior, these guys are native to the temperate and tropical waters, basically in every ocean in the world. And mola can vary a lot between Antarctica and Pacific, but there's genetic differences between individuals from the northern and southern hemispheres. So these guys are mostly found in warmer water that's warmer than about 10 degrees or about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And prolonged periods spent in water about 12 degrees or lower can lead to death. But they may actually use, because they will lay their profile to the sun and actually use the sun to kind of charge themselves. And being so large, they can hold on to a lot of that heat and then dive down or stay a little bit cooler, things like that, which is really, really interesting. And these guys are typically solitary, but it can also be found in pairs. Let's see if we can find one swimming around. Not right now. They're not swimming around right now, but it seems. But really, really cool fish. So the diet of the ocean sunfish is actually primarily lots of jellyfish and things like that. But they are generalist predators, so they'll consume small fish, fish larvae, squids, crustaceans, jellyfish, making up about 15% of their diet, but they're quite generalist in that regard. They will actually ingest eelgrass occasionally, and the range of food will range a lot from the surface deep water, and they will occasionally go down to the seafloor to find food in some areas, which is pretty cool. In terms of their life cycle, these guys may live up to like 10 years of captivity, but their natural lifespan is yet to be determined. And their growth rate is rather undetermined, or we don't really know, but a young specimen from Monterey Bay Aquarium increased its weight from 26 kilograms to 399 kilograms, or 57 to 880 pounds, and reached a height of nearly 1.8 meters or 5 feet 11 in 15 months, so quite a fast grower. And you can see the sheer size and thick skin of the adults deters many predators. But younger fish are actually vulnerable by predation from bluefin tuna and mahi-mahi. And adults are actually occasionally consumed by sea lions, sharks, and orcas. We don't know much about their mating, but we know they spawn typically around the North Atlantic, South Atlantic, North Pacific, South Pacific, and Indian Oceans. And females are estimated to carry as much as 300 million eggs in their body, which is more than any other vertebrate, which is really, really interesting. And they're typically released into the water and then externally fertilized by the sperm. And once they hatch, they typically get only about 2.5 millimeters long and weigh less than a gram, and they develop as fry, and they can survive to grow up to 60 million times their original weight and reach their adult proportions, which is the most extreme growth cycle of any vertebrate, which is so cool. And actually, the fry with these large pectoral fins and tail fin and body spikes uncharacteristic of adult sunfish actually look like little mini pufferfish, and which are their close relatives. And they actually school on protection, but as they grow, they typically go off and do their own thing and become solitary. So in terms of human interaction, these guys are quite docile and don't pose much of a threat to divers. Their injuries are rare, but there's a slight danger that they can jump on a boat, with one actually landing on a 4-year-old boy when the fish leapt onto the family boat, which is obviously not good. They're considered a delicacy in some regions, with large markets in Taiwan and Japan using them as cuisine, things like that. They can sometimes get caught in gill nets, and they make up nearly 30% of the total catch of the swordfish fishery, employing gill nets in California. So they're quite a common fish that gets accidentally caught, which can be quite a bad thing for their populations. And I believe that's why they're kind of considered vulnerable by the IUCN. But yeah, just a really, really cool animal. They're occasionally kept in captivity. As I mentioned, the Monterey Bay Aquarium had one. They're not widely held because they're quite large. Obviously, they have special requirements to keep them in captivity, things like that. But still a really, really awesome species. One thing in captivity that they struggle with is being... because they're such a pelagic species, they can rub themselves against the wall of the tank and injure themselves. But luckily, they can easily maneuver their body. They cannot really easily maneuver their body like that. But in smaller tanks, having a curtain or a current that kind of stops them from hitting the sides of the tank is usually good. And they often like to swim in wide circles. So as long as they can do that, they're typically good. And they need to have a sufficient depth as well, which can get about 3 meters tall, so they need quite deep tanks, about 3 to 5 meters, something like that. But typically they are kept in captivity in specialized areas, which is pretty cool. And yeah, really, really awesome fish. So yeah, that's the ocean sunfish. That was done by Leif Buffzoo and N.J. Lee. Did a really awesome job with that. Nice little remaster. Next, we're going to move on to the Barbary Cayman, which is another cool guy. This one was done by Vincible. Who doesn't love a good Vincible mod? So this is a really cool little caiman. So these guys, also known as the Parauruguay Cayman or the Piranha Cayman, these guys are a species of crocodile, and they're found in Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, and Paraguay. And they are brown in coloration, as you can kind of see here. They're not quite as bright as a lot of things. They have also dark blotches as well. The males will typically grow to a length of about 2 to 3 meters, or 6 to 9 foot 8, with females typically getting about 1.4 meters, or 4.6 feet. The typical habitat these guys live in is like lakes, rivers, wetlands, and stuff like that. And the diet typically consists of aquatic animals such as snails, but sometimes land vertebrates. Really, really cool. These guys are medium sized for a caiman. They get about 2 to 3 meters, as I mentioned, and about 58 kilograms, 128 pounds in weight, with females getting a bit smaller, 1.4 meters or 4'6", and 14 to 23 kilograms in weight, or 31 to 51 pounds. Really, really awesome. And you can see they've got these dark splotches here and these large osteoderms, not too dissimilar from other species of caiman that allow for thermoregulation and protection, which is also really cool. And a lot of the features as well, they make their teeth prominent, and they're actually often compared to piranhas, where they get their name, the Piranha Cayman. And you can see they've got these like darker splotches around here that really gives them a distinct look from other species of caiman. So in terms of their ecology, they live in lakes, rivers, and wetlands, but also can live in a variety of habitats like that. They typically feed on snails and fish, and sometimes snake, but they are known to eat animals such as capybara. And when hunting for snails, they often look for floating vegetation and use their strong jaws to break their shells. And actually, a stomach of a caiman was cut up in July 1986, and it showed that small parts of an eggshell that likely belonged to a caiman. And in general, crocodilians can eat the eggshells of the young after the young hatched. But in terms of breeding, these guys will typically breed around December, February, in the middle of the raining season. Nests are constructed by the females, which are built into a mound with lots of rotting vegetation and such, as we'll talk about with these cute little babies here. It often depends on the habitat type, though, but they most likely can have 44 eggs, but they most commonly lay between 22 to 35 eggs. And the females often exhibit multiple paternity, so that more so than other species of caiman. So a clutch of caiman can have multiple fathers, and females usually protect the nest during incubation, but they do less when human hunting presence is high, which ultimately cause a lower hatching survival rate. And these young little eggs will hatch around March, and um, with the young exhibit precocial ability, so they're able to pretty much be fresh out of the box and go out and survive. And they receive little help from their parents and having care of themselves. The mother at most would most likely just hang around and just be there to protect them, but she doesn't really feed them or anything. Oh, you're getting squashed by your dad. We'll have a look at the female where we can find her. There's another female here, pretty sure. Yeah, that's the female. They hide in grass during the daytime, and heron and storks can eat the young caiman, with females generally reaching sexual maturity about 10 to 15 years old. And similar species of this caiman can live for about 50 years, which has been the estimated lifespan for this caiman, but we don't really know. In terms of their distribution as well, these guys can be found in Argentina, northern Argentina, southern Brazil, and Paraguay, and one of the 3 species in the genus caiman, along with the spectacled caiman, as we already have in the game, and the broad-snouted caiman. And these guys were hunted into oblivion due to heading to oblivion because of being frequently hunted for their skins, and hunting all over waterholes and shot lots of them, like a lot of other species of caiman, because they were hunted for leather. But they have these really bony osteoderms, which previously made them uncommon for leather. But they have some spots that can be, and that caused the population to drop by the millions. And the population was estimated to be quite low due to these bans in like the 90s. But it's believed that now recovered up to numbers about 10 million specimens living in the Pantanal alone. So they're doing quite well now. And luckily, they are considered a species of least concern since 1966. And they are listed and threatened by some populations, but they're doing quite well now, luckily. Really, really cool caiman, having a good sleep there. And look at these cute little babies. How can you not love these little guys? Awesome. So again, this wonderful caiman was done by Invincible. Next, we're moving on to some birds. We've got here the blue-winged goose, so a really cool little bird here. Not little, they're quite a decent size. So this guy is a waterfowl that is actually only found or is endemic to Ethiopia, and the only member of their genus, Cynochen. And we don't really know how they're related to other species of waterfowl, but these guys are morphologically close to the shell ducks and seem to be related to the South American shield geese, which is quite similar in their courtship displays. And genetics show that they're a very distinct and ancient group of duck, together with the Halterb's duck, which is another African species that we don't really know what they're related to. And the wing morphology, the color pattern, and it seems these guys are similar and very different. These 2 species are very different from any other species of waterfowl, so they might form their own clade. We really don't know, things like that. But yeah, really, really awesome. So these guys, as you can see, are like a stocky, green, grayish and like whitish bird. Green-brown, you could say. They get about 70 centimeters long, or 28 inches, with a slightly paler head and upper neck, as you can see, a little bit more pale. Standing birds look fairly dull, grey to dirty white, and sometimes have blue along the edges, where they get the name the blue-winged goose. In flight, the species shows a pale blue forewing that helps get their name, and both males and females are quite similar, but immature birds are typically duller, and the plumage of these guys is typically thick and loose, and it's almost fur-like, as an adaptation to survive in the cooler temperatures up in the Ethiopian highlands, where they live with galadas and Ethiopian wolves and things like that. Again, they're endemic to Ethiopia, so that means they could be only found there. But still a really, really awesome species. We'll have a look at little guys here. And a cool thing about these guys as well is that these guys are a quiet species, but both sexes actually give a soft whistle, and they do not honk or crackle like true geese. So they typically don't honk like a goose, like a stereotypical goose would. But yeah, these guys are typically found in rivers, freshwater lakes, swamps, marshes, and things like that, and high-altitude scrublands and grasslands. And in terms of their behavior, they feed by grazing, and they're typically nocturnal, so they're plant eaters and typically just graze at night. and they can swim and fly quite well. But this is typically a terrestrial bird, as you can see here, and they're reluctant to do either, so they don't fly unless they have to. And they can form flocks outside the breeding season. So they breed in mountains and lake streams, and this little-known species is believed to build lined nests along amongst grass tussocks, and they typically lay 6 to 7 eggs. So a lot of these cute little guys here. And in terms of their conservation status, they are threatened by habitat loss, trapping for food, and drought, which has classed them as near threatened by the IUCN. So they're not in danger of extinction quite yet, but they are declining. There is concern that they could potentially have issues in their populations, but still a really, really awesome species, as you can kind of see here. Done by Leaf and Araukia, which really did a wonderful job showing off this cool species. Really, really awesome. So next, we're moving on to another really, really cool bird. We've got the Corybuzzard, which is a really, really interesting bird, as you can see here. So these guys are the largest flying bird native to Africa, and potentially one of the largest flying birds in the world, if not the largest. And these guys in their own group called the Ototiformes, and they are restricted to the Old World. They're one of 4 species that range from Africa to India to Australia, and the large-bodied genus of Anturus. And in fact, the male Corybuzzard may be the heaviest living animal capable of flight. So you can see these guys are typically quite a cryptic color, as you can see here, mostly grey to brown with finely patterned with black and white coloring. And you can see the upper body here has kind of got like a blackish to greyish bluff color as well, with some light colors at the bottom there, black and white patterning here. See, just a generally quite cryptic color bird with some loose feathers here and there. White belly, and you can see the tips of their feathers can be black and white, especially around the primaries, things like that, and yellowish legs. Females are quite similar in plumage, but they're much smaller. They get about 30%, 20 to 30% smaller in linear measurements, so length and height and things like that, and a little bit about 2 to 3 times less, weighed 2 to 3 times less than the male, and you can see they got quite thin legs. So a male Corybuzzard, which is obviously the largest one, these guys get a length of 100 to 135 centimeters, or 3'5" to 4'5", and they have a wingspan about 230 to 275 centimeters, or 7 to 9 feet. Males typically weigh about 7 to 18 kilograms, or 15 to 40 pounds, with the average weight being about 11 kilograms or 25 pounds, things like that, with large males getting up to 19 kilograms or 42 pounds. And a few very exceptional specimens may actually get up to like 20 to 23 kilos, or about 44 to 51 pounds. And even there's been some huge reports of them getting up to 40 kilograms, but none of them have been verified. And among these guys, only male great bustards reach similar weights, and the male Corybuzzard may actually be one of the largest flying animals alive today, which is like almost tied with like the trumpeter swan, the Andean condor, and the Dalmatian pelican. But yeah, it's kind of obviously neither here nor there. It's kind of on average they may get a little bit larger, but they might match the average weights. It's not an exact science, but it's definitely one of the largest flying birds alive today. So in terms of their distribution, these guys are typically found throughout southern Africa, so they can be common in places such as Botswana and Namibia, and they can be found into Angola and Zimbabwe. They are generally sparse, but they are common. Found around South Africa, generally just most of these places, where they typically prefer open grassy areas, often characterized by sandy soils. So they're like the Kalahari Sands, they're like plains, plateaus, grasslands, shrubs, savannas, and these kind of habitats. And typically they like areas with low rainfall, so less than like 600 millimeters a year. And they typically like hilly areas as well, where they follow fires and scatter trees and that, and they like these areas and kind of following herbivores as well, and pick up various foods out of the grass that they disturb. These buzzards do not do well in forested or well-wooded areas, and since they need a lot of space to take off, and they generally just prefer these open woodlands and things like that. Really, really awesome. So in terms of their behavior, they spend most of the time on the ground, which is up to 70% of their time just looking for food, that they do forage in low bushes and things. Being a large and heavy bird, they tend to avoid trying to fly when they can. And they also produce a loud booming mating call that is often uttered just before dawn to kind of say, hey, look at me, I'm big. And really, really cool. Their migratory movements are probably influenced by rainfall, but there's no evidence of a regular pattern. And there's like lots of local migrations where they move to areas that are typically more dry and a lot more food, things like that. And actually, adult and juvenile males move during the breeding season, where females do not appear to move. And generally, these guys will feed in the morning and in the evening and rest during the day under available shade. So in terms of their voice, they're less vocal than other bustards, but these guys can create loud barks and other calls and things like that. Chicks as young as 2 weeks will emit an alarm call, just to say, hey, look, there's other predators. And a male's mating call can be quite deep and resonant, and they also will bill snap at each other in a close range. But typically, other than that, they're not very vocal compared to other bustards. In terms of their solitary, they tend to live by themselves, but for a breeding pair. Otherwise, they can be gregarious sometimes, or typically hang out in groups. They have been found in groups of up to 5 to 6 birds, and these groups can occasionally reach up to 40 individuals. And large groups sometimes will congregate when there's like a big source of food or something, like a waterhole or something. But in general, these guys try to keep away from each other, and these foraging groups often are single sex, so typically only one of them. One sex, and they often hang out together just to protect themselves from predation. We'll have a look at some of the cute little babies as well as the females. Really, really awesome big males here, as you can see, and there's some females. Juvenile. Where's an adult? There we are. So, yeah. In terms of their diet, these guys are quite omnivorous, so they typically feed on a little bit of everything. These guys typically eat insects, often like dung beetles, caterpillars, locusts, and they may even follow large ungulates as they disturb the grass and these bugs fly away and things like that, just to try and things like that. But they'll also eat small vertebrates that includes lizards, small snakes, chameleons, small mammals that include rodents. Grasses they'll also eat as well, seeds, green leaves, so very generous in that regard. And in terms of breeding, these guys engage in lurk mating, so these guys will have an area where they all display to the females and try and fight over females, and they'll have a big throat balloon that they blow up and try and show off the females. But the biggest male will obviously get to mate with all the females, the biggest and bestest, and then the female will kind of go off and do her own thing after she's been mated and courted and things like that. These guys do not really make a nest. These guys will lay her eggs in like a shallow, unlined hole in typical scrape. And they usually have these quite cryptic eggs that are difficult to find. And usually 2 eggs are laid, but they sometimes will lay up to 2 to 3. Or 1 to 3. And clutch size is usually correlated with the local food supply. We'll have a look at these cute little babies as we talk about them. Eggs are somewhat glossy or waxy, and they can reach about 81 to 86 millimeters, or 2 to 3.4 inches in height, and about 2 inches in width, with each egg weighing about 149 grams, or about 5 ounces. And the female, who alone does most of that breeding behavior, she will stay by herself and stay around the nest about 98% of the time, not really drinking and eating. Occasionally, she will stand on her legs and raise her wings overhead and try and make sure that the eggs are properly incubated. And if approached incubating, the bird will either slip unobtrusively or the nest sit tight, so they all fly in the last moment if they are approached. The incubation period lasts about 23 to 30 days, so it does not exceed 25 days in wild specimens. The young are precocial, but very well camouflaged. The young are like a tawny color, as you see here, and they've got white underparts, things like that. Not too different from the adults, it seems. And on average, these guys will have about a 67% of eggs hatch, and one of the 2 young will typically survive into adulthood. And in Namibia, these guys are found to have had greatly reduced successes due to drought, but they often do well at captives in both wild and captivity as well. They seem to start breeding at about 3 to 4 years old, or second year of life, and then they do not start breeding until they're 3 to 4 years old. So they will leave the mothers when they're about 2 years old, and then start breeding when they're about 3 or 4 years old. And that is shown both in wild and captive bustards, which is really cool. And yeah, they do pretty well. They grow quite fast, as I mentioned. They get fledged at about 4 to 5 weeks, and they start flying about 3 to 4 months before they obviously start to go off and then do their thing once they reach about 2 years old. So in terms of their status, these guys are somewhat scarce just because they're large and in charge, and obviously lots of habitat encroachment and things like that has greatly hurt the species, and also hunting and things like that as well. But now they're generally not uncommon major protected areas, though agricultural things like that, poisons, things like that are really bad for them. But they are considered near threatened because of these potential risks. But overall, they're not doing too bad. They're considered near threatened. So these are just risks that we know where that can cause their population to decline. But yeah, really, really awesome species done by Ginger Toast. Ginger Toast has really been doing some awesome birds recently. I'm a really big fan of this guy here. So, yeah. Next, we've got another one done by Jen and Leaf, a really, really awesome one. This is one that's been waiting for a while. We've got the grey-crowned crane. Really, really awesome African bird. These guys are also known as the African crowned crane, the East African crane, lots of different names for this crane. And it's actually the national bird of Uganda, which is really cool. So these guys are really, really interesting. There's another species, the black crown crane, which we'll cover in another few episodes because they also made that. These guys are quite large. They get about 1 meter tall, or about 3 feet, and they weigh between about 3.5 kilograms or 7 pounds, with a wingspan of 2 meters or 6 feet 5 inches. As you can see here, they've got a mainly grey plumage where they get their name. Though their wings are predominantly white with these like yellow golden feathers on the crown as well, but they have a distinct black patch as well on their wings as well. And you can see they've got this crown of feathers that are very, very interesting, where they get the name the Grey Crown Crane. Very, very cool. Let's get the golden feathers on top. It's really, really awesome. The sides of the faces you can see is white, and they have this also inflatable bright red throat pouch. And you can see the bill is relatively short and grey as well. And they have black legs and slender legs as well. The sexes are quite similar, though males tend to be slightly larger. And these guys are actually the only species of cranes that roosts in trees. And because of their long hind toe, they can actually grab branches. And this trait actually seems to be an ancestral trait among the cranes, but lots of cranes lost this over time, but the grey crown crane just kept it. And they also lack a coiled trachea, and they have loose plumage compared to other crane species, which is really cool. So in terms of their habitats, they tend to live in dry savanna in sub-Saharan Africa. And they also like areas that are somewhat wetter when they nest. They can be found in marshes, grasslands, flatlands, cultivated lands from Uganda all the way down to South Africa. And they do not have a set migratory pattern, but the birds nearer the tropics tend to be a little bit more sedentary, and birds in more arid areas may have localized movements that during these areas. So in terms of their behavior, the grey crown crane is a behavior they will dance and bow and jump up to get attention of the females. And they have a booming call that involves their kind of inflation of their sac hair that they use to like increase each other, and they'll often make a honking sound that actually sounds quite different from the other trumpeting sounds of other cranes. Both sexes will dance, and immature birds will join the adults as well. And they can be found in groups of about 30 to 150 birds in these large flocks. In terms of their diet, these guys are omnivores. They'll eat insects, frogs, plants, seeds, grains, worms, snakes, small fish, and even other aquatic animals in their eggs. Standing on their feet, they walk. They will flush out insects, which quickly catch. And they'll often associate with grazing herbivores because a lot of these bugs will be disturbed by grazing antelopes and gazelles and that. And they often spend their entire day looking for food, and they will sleep in trees during the night, which is really, really cool. So in terms of breeding, these guys time their breeding season across the rains. So in East Africa, they will breed year-round, but most frequently during the dry periods. But in South Africa, they will breed when it's the rains. And during the breeding season, these guys will construct a large nest, which is a platform of grass and other plants and tall wetland vegetation. The grey crown crane will lay a clutch of around 2 to 5 glossy, dirty white eggs, and those are incubated for 28 to 31 days. The young are precocial and are quite able to run around and do their thing, and they can run as soon as they hatch, and they fledge at about 56 to 100 days. And once they're fully grown and independent, um, the chicks of different sexes will separate from their parents and start their own families. And they've also been known to congregate in large numbers in a ceremony akin to a wedding when two chicks get quote-unquote married off, which is quite cute. And the new couple will dance for a while and then before flying off to start a new family. So very, very interesting little things here. So betrothal, very similar to the Corybuzzard, these guys are kind of ready to go right after they hatch and able to feed themselves, and then fledge at about 100 days old. So that's about 3 or 4 months. In terms of their status, these guys remain common over some of their range, but due to habitat drainage, overgrazing, and pesticide pollution, they are considered endangered by the IUCN. The global population is estimated to be about 58 to 77,000, and in 2012 is considered endangered because of big declines. And again, they're considered the national bird of Uganda, and just generally a pretty awesome bird, if I do say so myself. Really, really awesome to see another cool big bird here, and you can see the cute little babies here. How wonderful. Really, Jen did a really wonderful job with these cranes. I'm a big fan. So next, we're moving on to the mammals. We've got here, this is a remake again, we have got the Barbary Macaque done by GiornoPizza. GiornoPizza was a really good coder and modder. Really, really awesome. So these guys, also known as the Barbary ape, these guys are a macaque species found in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco and Algeria, with a small introduced population in Gibraltar. So these guys, you can see they've got a dark pink face and a golden brown to grey pelt with this lighter underside here. They're not too different from other macaques, though they've got a short tail. They show sexual dimorphism, and the males are much larger than the females. The mean head to body length is about 55.7 centimeters, or 21.9 inches, in females, and about 63.4 centimeters, or 2.25 inches in males. So males are generally a little bit larger. They have a vestigial tail that is greatly reduced, if not absent, compared to other macaque species. The males have a more prominent tail, and these guys reach an average body weight of about 9.9 to 11 kilograms, 22 to 24 pounds in females, and males are a little bit larger at 14 to 16 kilograms, or 32 to 35 pounds. So in terms of the habitat, as I mentioned, they're the only macaque species found outside Asia, and the only African primate that survives north of the Sahara Desert, where they typically live in the fragmented areas of like the Middle and High Atlas Mountains in Morocco. And as I mentioned, there's a small population in over Gibraltar. And these guys actually are separated by about 700 kilometers, but the gap was smaller during the Holocene, so they probably were connected population. Really, really awesome guys, as you can see here. Kind of moving in the monkey train. We've got the monkey train going on. But anyway, they can live in a variety of habitats like grasslands, oak forests, things like that. They tend to like the Mediterranean climate, and they have seasonal extremes. In Morocco, these guys inhabit the Atlas cedar forests, but this could reflect present habitat rather than their preferred habitat. And fossil evidence showed that these guys lived in southern Europe and all across North Africa historically, and they were typically found across North Africa to Morocco, things like that. And the Tasurian population was mentioned by the ancient Greeks, but the species has been extinct there potentially within the last 2,500 years. So there's about the population that lives in Gibraltar, the population is estimated to be about 300 macaques, and they're kind of considered invasive. But there is evidence that there were populations, potentially in the Holocene or the late Pleistocene, that there were populations living in Europe. So like other macaques, these guys are gregarious. They form groups of several males and females, and this can be between 10 to 100 individuals, and are matriarchal. So the hierarchy is determined by the lead female. But unlike other macaques, the males will actually participate in raising their young. This is a male here, so you can find a female to talk about. Really awesome here. So the males will spend a considerable amount of time playing and grooming infants as well. And yeah, basically everyone just takes care of everyone. It's kind of a bit more communal. The mating season will typically run from November through March, and the gestation period is about 147 to 192 days, with females usually having one offspring per pregnancy, though females can rear twins in rare instances. And offspring will reach their maturity at about 3 to 4 years old, as you can kind of see here, rather cute, about 4 years old, and they may live up to 20 years or more. So males will sometimes get into conflicts and form coalitions with other males, sometimes where they will kind of fight each other for fitness and things like that. They often will groom each other as well to lower the stress levels in most of the individuals that do the grooming, so try and make sure everyone's kind of happy and healthy. And they benefit might outweigh the costs of grooming as well, since the less stressed everyone is, the better, and then they're able to go off and then forage and be safe and feel like they're safe. So, although Barbary macaques are sexually active at all points during the female's reproductive cycle, it's very obvious because the females will have swellings that around her back that will show that she's ready to mate. And they often differ from other primates, and they often mate with a majority of males in their social group. And while the females are active in choosing these sexual encounters, the mating behavior of these social groups are not entirely determined by the female's choice. And these multiple matings by females will decrease a certain of paternity in, obviously, the male macaques as well. And as I mentioned, in terms of parenting, these guys basically form all sex groups. All the males, all the females, everyone helps take care of the babies in their groups, so they're quite communal in that regard. And males even act as true parents to the infants and carry them around, things like that, which is really, really interesting. So in terms of their diet, these guys will consume a mixture of plants and insect prey. They typically feed on flowers, seedlings, gums, things like that. But also common prey can be earthworms, centipedes, grasshoppers, millipedes, scorpions, scale insects, tadpoles, ants, things like that. And they actually cause major damage in their main habitat of the Atlas cedar forests of Morocco. And since deforestation has been a major issue, there's been lots of research looking into the damage macaques will do on the trees as well. And if they're too high a density, they often will have issues and rip too much bark off the trees. And a lack of water sources or exclusion from monkeys from water sources will actually be a cause of the cedar bark stripping because they obviously need to drink. In terms of their predators, these guys are typically preyed upon by leopards, eagles, jaguars. Not the jaguars. Jaguars are from South America. But other birds of prey, such as crowned eagles, and also domestic dogs, have been known to kill macaques. And that's why they have alarm calls. And they obviously use these alarm calls to warn other macaques that there's predators in the area and get to safety. So in terms of threats, these guys have suffered a major decline, and they are considered endangered species, mainly due to habitat fragmentation and degradation of their forest habitats, though also with poaching and trading, illegal trade, things like that, have really hurt their populations, things like that. So one of those common things, especially like activity, things like that. It's only estimated that kind of 12,000 to 21,000 macaques are actually left in Morocco and Algeria. And once their populations were typically much wider, so because of obviously the changes in the climate, during the Pleistocene, these guys lived across Europe and like Portugal, France, Germany, and the British Isles as well. But during the Holocene, they decreased in the arrival of the Ice Age and they became extinct in the Iberian Peninsula about 30,000 years ago. So you could say their range is kind of restricted because of this interglacial that we're in, so they're typically only found in northern parts of Africa, which of course hurts their population, and they're often threatened by overgrazing, habitat loss, things like that in their habitat. And also tourism is another big thing. People like to come and look at them for there's been cultural taboos and things like that when people try and dissect them, and they can live in tourist sites as well. But they are considered endangered because of habitat deforestation, things like that. Habitat degradation, all of that, you got to be very, very careful. But yeah, still a very wonderful species, and still quite a number of them, between 12 and 21,000. That's still quite a lot. But yeah, too much loss of their habitat can really hurt their populations. Still a really, really awesome macaque there. So that one was done by GiornoPizza. Next one was done by Leaf, Nick, and Narwhal. We have got the Masai Giraffe. Really, really awesome guy here. So yeah, we've got this really, really wonderful giraffe. Let's see if you can find our big male here. We've got a big male. awesome big male giraffes. So these guys, the Masai giraffe or giraffe Tripasculi, sometimes considered their own species, depending on your taxonomy. There's lots of range of taxonomy in giraffes. These guys are native to East Africa and can be found in southern Kenya and in Tanzania. And they have these really distinctive patterns, as you can see here, that really gives them their own look. And they're actually considered the national animal of Tanzania. So that's really, really cool. So the Masai giraffe is distinguished by their jagged and regular spots compared to other populations. And they're the largest giraffe species, and makes them the tallest land animal on Earth, with bulls generally getting larger and heavier than females that weigh up to about 1,300 kilograms and about 5.5 meters tall. And in the wild, individuals can live up to be about 25, and most cases actually live longer than captivity. And their most famous feature your neck here, and they actually only have 7 vertebrae in the neck, the same as you and me, but that's just elongated. And that actually makes up a third of their body height. And they also have a long muscular tongue, as you can kind of see here, that allows them to grab plants and things like that. And they also have these ossicones here, which are not horns. They're kind of just like bony growths. That allows them to kind of fight and things like that. They use them to club each other as well. Not too dissimilar to other species of giraffe, like the northern giraffe or the potentially reticulated giraffe. So in terms of their conservation, the Masai giraffe is considered endangered, and they've decreased by half due to poaching and habitat loss. The estimated populations of giraffe are 32,000 in the wild, particularly with these guys. And these guys have been shown living out in both inside and outside protected areas. They showed low adult survival rate outside these protected areas because of poaching, and young calves due to predation as well. So the meta populations show that it's very important to keep giraffes in these larger landscapes. And just really, really cool species. There's about 100 Masai giraffes living in captivity, though there are some hybrids around there because it's obviously kind of zoo mix things. But yeah, if you look at giraffe taxonomy, it's very, very complicated. There is potentially the Masai giraffe being known as the southern giraffe. There's like the one species model. There's the 3 subspecies model or 3 species model, or the like 4. So it really just depends. Usually it's like 4 is probably the most generally accepted, which is the northern giraffe, the southern giraffe, the Masai giraffe, and the reticulated giraffe. Yeah, really, really awesome. Done by Leaf, Nick, and Darwaller. But last and most certainly not least, this one was done by Gabboi and GiornoPizza back again. We have got the Indian wolf. Really, really cool guy here. So this is a subspecies, or potentially species, of the grey wolf, as we'll get into. These guys also called the Indian plains wolf. They're one of the older lineages, like similar to the Himalayan wolf, of the grey wolf. Really, really interesting. So Canis indica is sometimes a species they're referred to. They split from other wolf subspecies like the Himalayan wolf and then the rest of wolves about 1 million years ago. So that means they're quite genetically distinct. Kind of in between the Himalayan wolf and the Holactic grey wolf in terms of when they divided or when they split from other groups. So they're quite unique in that regard. So about like a little under 1 million years ago, about 800,000, 700,000 years ago, they split. So there is an argument that they could be their own species, which is often called Canis indica. And the wild population is endangered, and there's believed to only be about 2,000 or 3,000. But they can be found across India and into the Middle East. And that's why they're sometimes partly also considered that, as they are quite genetically different from the Indian wolf and genetically based when it comes to the other grey wolf subspecies. So that's why they sometimes consider their own thing. They're quite similar to the Eurasian wolf, though, but they are smaller with a slightly more slightly built, and they have shorter fur, as you can kind of notice, since they live in warmer areas. They typically get about 57 to 72 centimeters at shoulder height, or about 22 to 28 inches. Males get between 19 and 25 kilograms on average, or 42 to 55 pounds, and females about 17 to 22 pounds, or 37 to 49 pounds in weight. And their length ranges from 103 to 145 centimeters, or 41 to 57 inches from nose to tail. They look like the Arabian wolf quite a lot. They have a short fur, as you can see here, because they live in tropical areas. but they also have these kind of lots of variation as well. This kind of dark line here that fades sometimes. Their habitat is actually quite similar to those of other grey wolf subspecies. So these guys generally live in smaller packs that generally do not exceed sizes of about 6 to 8 individuals, and they're also quite a bit less vocal. Though they will have howls and things like that they don't often howl. They have other calls and barks and whines and stuff that they use to communicate and things like that. And their range overlaps with a lot of really interesting species, such as the Bengal tiger, the Asiatic lion, brown bears, Bengal foxes, leopards, sloth bears, and jackals. So they live in quite a packed habitat, you could say. They're also nocturnal, and they hunt from dusk to dawn, where they'll eat a variety of different prey species and a bunch of different strategies, and they often are exceptional in their speed and endurance, so they typically run down prey. These guys will often spend their time hunting Indian hares and other rodents, but they will also eat black bucks, which is a major prey species in the Black Buck National Park. And often, because the antelope is faster, these guys will usually chase them in ravines and things and wear them out, and even try and separate sick and injured animals as well, which is a strategy that is common seen in other subspecies of wolves, and it's actually quite successful. And when they get close enough to attack, they will grab the snout and try and asphyxiate or try and choke the antelope, while others will attack the rear. And the Indian wolves are usually reported to use potentially lure antelopes, which is pretty interesting. And one story suggests that a wolf rolled over with its legs upright while the black bucks were feeding. And when these guys accidentally disturbed the wolf, the two wolves kind of sprung it to kill it. Though this is kind of a story, we don't really know. But in their range, they typically lived widespread across the Holy Land east of the Jordan River, but they greatly decreased because of farmers hunting them. And currently, Israel's conservation policies, they maintain a moderately sized wolf population, which is quite small. Though Turkish wolves have no legal protection, they actually have reached about 7,000 individuals, with little populations in Iran, things like that. But the Indian subcontinent, they're typically a little bit more common. These guys are their typical, like Afghanistan and Pakistan, they're their strongholds. There's estimated to be about 300 wolves in that area. And in northern India, there's populations like that. They used to be quite more common in the 1920s. There were over 100,000 wolves in this area, and their population have decreased to only like a few thousand. But luckily, they are protected in most areas and classes endangered. So, with lots of populations live in areas or live in low numbers, but there are conservation programs to obviously protect them and stuff like that. In terms of their humans, they were obviously because they were hunting livestock and stuff like that, but people always had a very interesting relationship with wolves. And they will feed on livestock when natural prey is scarce, but often that's only when it's scarce, it's only when they're desperate, things like that. And in culture, these guys are often considered clever, like the fox and coyote, which is really, really cool. We'll have a look at these cute babies. And in terms of other culture, things like that, they're often ambivalent reputation in Iranian cultures, and sometimes considered kind of told stories, they're cautionary tales told as by having children. And they also played a central role in the famous The Jungle Book. So these were the kind of subspecies that took in Mowgli and then obviously reared him up and obviously helped him grow up to defeat Shere Khan and protect him from the Bengal tiger Shere Khan. But yeah, this is a really interesting subspecies, or potentially species, as I mentioned. They're quite genetically divergent from your typical grey wolf. Really, really awesome animal here. So, yeah, Gabboi did a wonderful job, and GiornoPizza also did a wonderful job coding it. So, yeah, wonderful job to everyone today. May have been a little bit lackluster today talking about these animals, but really, really awesome. Obviously, you guys can go research for yourself because these are such wonderful animals. But yeah, I think this would be a very great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.